Let's now cross live with the India Today Conclave for our session Crusades 2.0, Why the World Needs to Fear the ISIS.
Or an MRI technician and the hospitals are falling apart, there is no secular law anymore, you become a produce seller. So suddenly, if you were a family subsisting on agriculture, there was enormous competition. So a lot of these women ended up having or choosing to join because of pressure from families. So they did become collaborators, and I think they felt incredibly tainted by this, and they felt the weight of what they had done on their shoulders. But they didn't do it because they believed. They didn't believe that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was the caliph. They didn't believe in the extremely brutal interpretation of Islamic law that ISIS was enforcing. They did it because they had to, and they were very, very resentful the entire time. They saw that ISIS was, in so many ways, a foreign occupation. So much of the leadership had come from outside. They spoke in British accents in the market. They heard Tunisian dialects. These were not Syrians ruling over Syrians, and so these women also felt very, very resentful. They had to go to the back of the line to buy bread. They had to pay more at the hospital. They were second-class citizens in their own hometown, even as they were working for ISIS itself. So these were the Syrian women who were, girls of that town, and a couple of them married fighters because, again, the fighters came. One of the fighters was a Saudi. He had a lot of money. He showed up at the door bearing gold, and the family needed it. And the father pressed the young girl. He said, we need it. Can you do this to help us? Because we're all struggling. And so she did. So this is a sort of reality, the kind of compromises and choices that some of these women had to make. And it's incredibly tragic, not only because of the kind of individual things that they went through. Their husbands died in suicide operations, and within a couple of weeks, the ISIS commanders came knocking at the door to say it's time to marry again. And they said, well, we haven't even had our widowhood. Islam gives women a mourning period during which they're not permitted to even remarry, but they didn't care. They said, there are other fighters who need you, and your husband is a martyr, so you should just feel proud. What do you mean grief? You don't need to grieve. So this is what they went through. Their circumstances are really different, and their motivations obviously are very different than women who come from the outside. One of the women that I spoke with, her job was to go to the border and bring in young women, usually who came from Europe, to join. And she was the one who escorted in those 3 schoolgirls from London. I don't know if you remember. They were from the East London neighborhood of Bethnal Green, and their departure to go join the Islamic State completely shattered Britain, because not only were disaffected young men, of Muslim backgrounds going, but bright, popular, successful schoolgirls of the age of 15 and 16 were going. And their story is a different one. Why would they go? Why would they go to join, why would they willingly go to join a force that treats women in this way? So part of my work is on that, to understand that as well. And some of these themes overlap amongst these different societies. Young women have identity conflicts. What does it mean to be a young British Muslim woman in London today or in Britain today? What does it mean to be a young Tunisian woman in a country that's very fractured, where identity is really broken, and especially the appeal of political Islam is strong? And of course, there's the role of youthful naivete, this idea of adventure, and this conviction that the media lies to them, that the media lies about what ISIS does. All of this, you would look at this and think, if you were a smart 16-year-old A student in London, why would you go? It's because young women, so many young Muslims in the West don't trust the media. They think that it's Islamophobic. They think that it doesn't report accurately. It doesn't represent their grievances. And so all of this, to many young people who go, seems like a myth. It seems unreal. As we talk about this, though, I think that coming back to how ISIS uses these women is really important. They're certainly a key part of the recruitment effort. Women in Tunisia, for example, are the ones who run the recruitment networks. They run the ISIS media platforms, they run the recruitment websites, and Facebook groups for both men and women. And how did they become a part of this? They were part of, in Tunisia, for example, a very active Salafist movement that was very, very popular in the country before it was banned after a couple of big suicide attacks. So they were empowered in a way through an extremely conservative ideology of Salafism, which sounds counterintuitive to us, but they were out on the streets in Tunisian universities protesting together for the right to wear a niqab. So I think a lot of what we see in places like Tunisia is very independent to that place. It's very much a reflection of that country's recent history, its Arab Spring interactions, its revolt, and its unresolved set of challenges with how to deal with political Islam and how political Islam at the fringes flirts with Salafism. But ISIS not only uses these women very cunningly to do the mechanics of recruitment, but it makes the women itself an aspect of the recruitment. So they are an appeal to fighters. I mean, this is the first jihad in contemporary history where if you're a young man going, you think that you can get a woman before you go there. So you can, there's a case of a young man from Britain who was leaving his pregnant wife in the UK to go join ISIS, end his life there. But before he went, he was already setting up, his wife there. So it's the first jihad where you can have company. You're meant to have female company before martyrdom. And ISIS relies on this. It's a very, very cunning and central part of its strategy and its appeal. It's also a place where the propaganda tells you can even take your family. It's the first case where we have entire families, migrating together. It's pitched as a place where you can go and have a role in building a state. Young women who are medics or chemists, pharmacists, find themselves susceptible to this kind of state-building propaganda. But in reality, none of that is actually what is happening on the ground. It is not a family-friendly place. It is not a place where women have any kind of autonomy at all. One of the young women that I spoke with very much wanted to have children. And she's the one who married the Saudi, and another as well. Both of these young Syrian women wanted to have children. And the fighters that they were married to forced them to take birth control. And this, again, sort of flies in the face of the propaganda we see, especially in the West. Young women in the West who go think about their roles as mothers. They're going to go and raise the next generation of mujahideen in Raqqa. But in reality, the commanders are asking, the fighter husband said, my commander has told me that you have to take birth control. All the wives have to take birth control because if you are a young father and your wife has a little baby, it makes it harder to go on a suicide operation. So you can see that the propaganda and the projection of happy family life, next generation state building is all empty, and that really behind it is a very, very cold, stark, killing machine that essentially uses these women as temporary comfort for the fighters en route to their final end. I think the propaganda, however, is extremely skillful, and the propaganda is at the center of the entire assault against ISIS in the media, and also, and I think as Daniel mentioned very correctly, they're very, very savvy. They do things simply to horrify us and to make themselves seem exceptional.
Incident, a promising young kabaddi player was shot dead on the streets of Rohtak in Haryana. What's truly alarming is that the fatal shooting was caught on camera on Tuesday afternoon. Kabaddi player Sukhwinder Singh
Kind of living a quiet, happy, boring life. So I decided to get married, and my wife says, welcome to hell, boy. But the episode ain't that bad. It's just about all right, above average.